So adherence is really a way for the clinician to ask the patient about, okay, how well are you following the treatment plan that I gave you a couple of months ago? And you don't want the patient to just answer in a way that just pleases the clinician. You want to answer in an honest way and not be shamed for it. We're not rewarding you medicating 100% correctly because that's setting up patients for failure. We're rewarding you for being honest about how you're medicating. So let's go. So welcome back to the Designer Will See You Now podcast, where we talk health, advocacy, and design. And we are your hosts, Bella and Ola. And we both work in UX design. And we want to really pop that hood open and together understand what goes on or what goes into designing for health. So today we have a little after work episode. And these episodes, the setup for those are that it's a bit more casual. We grab a little drink. So we've got both got a little glass of Prosecco today. Cheers, Ola.
Cheers.
I'm a bit hungover, but that's okay.
It's 12 p.m. where I am, so
it is what it is.
Great.
I'm doing a little brunch right now. It's good. And anyway, yeah, so we're just going to kind of have a little chat about some designs that we're interested in. And sometimes we'll have guests on. In this first episode, we won't. It'll just be us because what we're going to talk about is something that both Ola and I have worked on personally. So yeah, today's just us, and it's really an important part of what we're trying to achieve with this podcast because it's definitely like just keeping a casual tone about it and being able to discuss it, pulling up a chair with friends and just kind of chatting about the latest app you've tried or the latest tool you've, I don't know, read about or something. Or maybe you're just passionate about a certain topic and you want to discuss it. So today's after work will be about AsthmaTuner, and that's something we both touched on and had our part in designing. This is an asthma management tool, and I'm currently working with it. Ola has worked on it for 2 years when she lived here in Stockholm as well. And yeah, it'll just be us chatting about it today. We're really excited to walk you through it because obviously we're a little biased, but we think it's a cool tool. And yeah, a pretty interesting app for respiratory health.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Before we get into that though, let's do our little question. And that I'm going to ask you, Ola, this time. Is there any design that's touched your life since we last spoke or since the last episode? Yeah, anything that's touched you that's been good or bad design?
Yeah, so Figma had their design conference, and I know I'm bringing up a design conference now too, but we talked about it last time. But Figma had their design conference back in May, and I didn't see all the talks at that time. And about 2 weeks ago, they posted this talk from this senior UX designer at this app called Forerunner. And her name is Megan Metzger. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't. No, okay. Not at all.
It's so it's designing for climate disaster, something along those lines.
Okay.
And essentially what Forerunner does is they're an app for people who work in disaster response teams, especially when it comes to natural disasters like flooding, hurricanes, and obviously this is especially relevant now as we're seeing more and more natural disasters. And what the team at Forerunner noticed is that with these disaster response workflows, there was a lot of inefficiency and a lot of manual work. And it basically looked like, when a disaster tears through an area, a lot of the buildings are destroyed, and
Mm-hmm.
only some of them have the possibility to actually be rebuilt. But in order for them to be rebuilt, they need funding. And funding comes, at least in the US, through FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to get that funding, they have to be approved, and FEMA has to basically say, yes, this building has a possibility of even being rebuilt. What it looks like now with disaster response teams is there are people on the ground who go to people's houses or different buildings in neighborhoods, and they make notes on pen and paper and take photos on their personal phones, and they then take that information, take that data, and upload it back at the office, and they have to manually enter all the information, and then they also have to do special calculations based off of different variables that FEMA provides in order to be able to determine how much money they could potentially get as funding to rebuild. And this entire process can take up to 8 hours sometimes per
Wow.
application. And so what Forerunner did is they wanted to create an app that would just make that whole workflow a lot simpler and have a single source where they can upload all of the information, but then also have the calculations for funding built in, so that people don't have to do that manually, and there isn't that increased risk of human error. And the outcomes that they were able to have from users telling them the difference in the amount of time that they were spending on these submissions was like 3 to 4 hours down to 45 minutes. And they had more than 15,000 applications pass through their system. And the thing that stood out to me with what Megan was talking about is she had three principles when it came to designing for these types of urgent, high
Mm-hmm.
stakes contexts. And
Mm-hmm.
she was talking about how important it is to be mindful of those types of contexts, not just in the sense of climate disaster, but also, for example, with health tech. How does your app function, or how does your tool function when someone is in the middle of a medical emergency, or
Mm.
when even with e-commerce, when you're trying to check out and you're in a moving car and there isn't good cell service, like for example,
Right.
how we're trying to record this podcast right now and there isn't
Yeah.
good internet service, how does your app function? How are the
Yeah.
key features still available? And her three principles, I wrote them down so I would remember them. Uh, so the three principles. The first one was trust comes from reliability under pressure. So
Mm.
essentially, users are going to trust in your software when it's always there for them, regardless of the situation. So the second that the software would start to fail, or something didn't work as expected, or because of the conditions it wasn't available, then they
Mm-hmm.
knew that immediately those response teams were going to go back to pen and paper, right? Um,
Right.
and then the second one was the right tools make impossible tasks possible, which this
Mm-hmm.
was an
Mm-hmm.
interesting one, but essentially just that the right with the right sort of solution, we can have workflows that are as efficient as cutting down from 4 hours to 45 minutes in a way that
Right.
people might not have been able to imagine before, because they're just used to the way that they were working. They didn't think
Mm-hmm.
about,
Mm-hmm.
how can we actually cut all of this down? And then clarity enables action. So something she really emphasized was this whole idea of form follows function. And,
Mm. We love that.
when a disaster happens, nothing is ever going to plan, right?
Yeah.
And there's confusion everywhere and people don't know what to do next. And
Mm.
so that's where it's so key for their software, especially, to be like, okay, this is what to do next. This is all the key actions are immediately available for people, rather than them having to sift
Mm.
through and kind of figure it out themselves. And she made a point of, in our industry, there is so much emphasis on the aesthetics, and that's oftentimes what wins awards. And of course, that's very, very important as well, because it builds engagement with users and it's important for branding and there's a lot of care and attention to detail there. But at the same time, how can we as designers really think not just about functionality, because we think about usability all the time, but also thinking about performance. Because she made a great point that with the way that we work as designers versus engineers, designers are the ones who are typically focused on aesthetics and usability, and then engineers are the ones who are focused on performance. And so based off how they implement the software, you're going to have different loading times. You're going to have different features loading at different priority levels. How can we as designers just be more mindful of those technical constraints as well, and being mindful of how can we actually design for improved performance and improved efficiency and functionality in these scenarios where conditions are less than ideal. And I just thought that that was obviously so applicable to health tech as well, because we're going, as health tech designers, we have to be mindful of situations, like I mentioned, with medical emergencies. But also people are reliant on these tools for knowing, their daily treatment or knowing how to contact their doctor. And so when also they don't have a good connection, how do you help still support them through that? Considering how important our tools are to people's daily lives. So just a really interesting talk there. I really liked her points. And also it was just nice to see an app that was trying to solve some issues that we're having with a climate disaster response. Obviously, we talked a little bit about this yesterday too, as far as not seeing a ton of technology focused on that. So it was cool to have, a talk from a company that really is trying to look into that, especially as FEMA, it gets more and more constrained in the US.
Right.
But she actually brought up an interesting data point, and I know I'm going on, so I'm going to stop in a second. But an interesting data point that I believe it costs the US $148 billion, or costs $148 billion annually to just dealing with climate disasters. And that number has gone up 950% since the 90s.
Wow.
So it's an issue that's only going to keep getting worse.
Yeah.
And so thinking about the technology that we use, it's insane that people are still using literally pen and paper, their own phones. Like it's a lot of these systems are so legacy and so archaic. Again,
Yeah.
same thing goes for the medical industry, of course. But like I think now there's been more of an innovation in that field. But yeah, it was. Stop there.
Wow. No, but that's so cool. Like a really cool talk. Maybe we can, if it's, I hope it's like recorded somewhere. It'd be cool to
Yes,
like link it in the show
yeah.
notes. We'll link it in the show notes. Don't worry. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. And I also really like those points that Megan boiled it down into. I especially like the point about like it's got to work when things go wrong. Like you have to design for specifically things to go wrong, for the internet to cut out, for power to cut out, for anything that can like actually we're I think we have a tendency to design for the perfect user or the perfect scenario. The internet connection's great, everything loads fast, everyone's got a smartphone, just that thing. Like we use a system here in Sweden called Bank ID, as you know, and we use this to identify ourselves digitally. And this goes for everything. I'm talking like for those of you who are listening outside of Sweden aren't familiar with it, it's like everything from logging into your bank to paying your taxes to identifying yourself at the doctor. It's everywhere. So I mean, as soon as someone doesn't have that, or doesn't have that available to them, like you're yeah, you're fucked. Like you can't do anything in society. So yeah, that's I think that's really interesting. And then just lastly, that in our testing of our prototypes and designs and tools, like simulating a bit of a stressed out interaction, like you were mentioning, like having a line behind you at the grocery store, or and needing to check everything out yourself, and something's going wrong, you're gonna get stupid in that moment of like, I don't know what I'm looking for, like what is it that I'm supposed to do next. I think that's such an interesting thing that we need to be better at simulating, because otherwise it's a very much like a lab like situation where everything's perfect, there's nothing going on around you, it's quiet, someone is asking you to like do one thing. Yeah, no,
And that's
super
never
interesting.
that's so rarely how we actually use apps.
Yeah,
So I love your point about like how do we simulate that to actually test? Because obviously we can't stress users out.
I mean,
But
we can like simulate. I mean, I wonder if like one thing is to like give a time limit. Like the thing that flashed like
true.
in the back of my head was like, what would happen if you, because a lot of the time like you to encourage people to sign up to test, you offer a little incentive, and that can be like movie tickets or a little gift card, um and that like to originally set the gift card at like a certain level, or say you get one movie ticket, and then tell them like, if you complete this task in 15 seconds, we'll double it and give you two movie tickets, or whatever it is, like to simulate a little, like even if it's not necessarily negative stress, but it's just like a little, give you a
Yeah.
little adrenaline rush.
Yeah, that's fun actually. That's a really good idea. Now I
I'm gonna
want to do
definitely
a
try
test
that.
like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna definitely try it out because I'm in the middle of some usability testing right now. So um yeah, I'm gonna see what happens with that and give you a little update. Oh,
Cool.
but cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, of course. Should we transition into talking a little bit about AsthmaTuner? I don't know if you want to preface like what AsthmaTuner is, because for anyone who's not clear on that, Bella basically is AsthmaTuner as far as
Oh,
the
okay.
design. I mean, you started as the very first designer there, and you still are the lead designer. So yeah, there's no one
Yeah,
better
I don't
to.
know what we're doing with our titles nowadays, but I've been at AsthmaTuner for almost 7 or 8 years now. I think I have to do the calculations per, but it's something around there. So it's been a while, and to think back on like what it was when I started, like that first day of being given like the little prototype, and we called it the refrigerator. But yeah, anyway, let me back up and explain what
Wait,
AsthmaTuner is.
why was it called the
We
refrigerator?
I think it'll make more sense if I'll show like the part where, like showing the flow of the treatment check flow, it'll make more sense. I'll like go
Okay,
back to
gotcha,
how it
gotcha.
was. But anyway, so and thank you for your really kind words, and it's really a team effort, I have to say. Like we're a bunch of um there's a bunch of passionate nurses first and foremost, who and it's like grounded in um the healthcare system, or like how the um, both specialists and primary care clinicians work with asthma patients. And then we've got the developers, and now, yeah, we've had you as a designer on. We've got this great product team and regulatory people. Thank God for the regulatory people, because oof. But anyway, AsthmaTuner is it's, I usually compare it to how, because for whatever reason diabetes is a bit more like widely understood, I think, in terms of like seeing or just hearing that someone has diabetes and you know that they have to test their blood sugar is something that's like pretty established. Most people would know that. Um, and that can be done in different ways, but I know that like my mom pricks her finger sometimes and gets a little reading, and that's how she knows if her blood sugar is high or not, or yeah, if she has to do anything different with her meds. So AsthmaTuner is doing that, but for I mean, giving patients that like ability to manage it themselves. It's doing that for asthma. Um, and I'm just thinking back to like how crazy it must have been in like before the 60s or 70s, I think is when like glucose monitoring became like the idea of doing it from home, that became like a more widely known thing or like widely adopted thing. Um, so imagine like being diabetic and just like having to do like I don't know, a checkup or two per year and like kind of hope that that gives like an accurate depiction of like how you're doing. It's yeah, so that because that's how traditional asthma care works. It's like you're if you're in a good situation, you're probably going to see your doctor or nurse depending on which country you live in and how severe your asthma is. You're probably getting that checked on once or twice a year. And then maybe you need to go into the ER every once in a while because you get an asthma attack or and yeah, and but then it's already too late. Like you're yeah, it's a scary thing to have that kind of like being guesswork. So AsthmaTuner takes the guesswork out of it. We yeah, we're trying to put the asthma control in the hands of the patients, educating them about first and foremost that they don't have to feel as sick as they currently do, and that like you can do something about your symptoms. You're supposed to be able to live a symptom free life um, with the medications that we have. The issue is not knowing when to bump up that dose of your inhaler, when to do like, okay, I gotta bump this up to 2 puffs today because I'm doing worse today than I did yesterday. And it fluctuates a lot. So that's why we've developed this tool to give you a daily insight if you want to into how your asthma's doing. It's really silly of me to explain this without having the Bluetooth device here with me. Oh, actually, yeah. What I'll do is I'll share my screen, um, and I'll go into one of the instruction videos, like showing the little.
That's smart.
This is AsthmaTuner, and I wanted to kind of show the device and just like show a little about how it works because it's like a it's called a spirometer, and what it does is measure how much. Let me see how much air you can blow out in a certain amount of time, or um, I mean, you can a lot of people like to call it lung capacity, which like yeah, kind of that, but also um, there's so many different little parameters that it can measure. But basically, what it is, it's a little turbine and it spins, and the speed is recorded, and from that you can get information about the volume of air you're breathing out or you're able to keep in your lungs. So here you're seeing this person um, is holding a little device there. She's connected it to her phone, and then she's blowing pretty hard but pretty quickly into this device, and it gives you that um, gives you oh, it's going really fast, but it gives you a little graph, and then it's also giving you. I'm gonna go here. So what I was talking about earlier about the refrigerator was that the the original version of this app, or the prototype, all it was like a square, like a hollow square when you enter the app, or a rectangle, I mean, like a vertical one. And on the bottom, it just said start blow test or something like that. And the, this keeps turning on me. It, so it would like, that would be the only thing you could do in the app. You would just like immediately open it, press the button,
That
and then blow into it. And then
that was it? You literally,
that
like,
was
when you
it. That was
launched
the
the
only thing
app?
you could do.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I
all
didn't
you could
even
do
see
with
it
it.
at that point.
Anyway, if we move on from that lung function test part, so here you are answering some symptom questions, and this is based off of a, it's kind of like a survey or like an assessment. It's called the asthma control test, the ACT, and it's a couple of questions that are basically what's being shown here. Have you, in the past 7 days, needed your reliever more than twice because you've had like extra symptoms? Have you had any daytime asthma symptoms? Have you had any night waking? Like, have you woken up because you've had symptoms? Answering yes or no on these questions will also factor into the algorithm, which ultimately will show you how much medication you should be taking to get your asthma under control. Like, say, or first of all, we've got the three asthma control levels, right? We've got controlled asthma, like you're doing fine, keep going with your daily medication, everything's under control. We've got partly controlled, meaning that either your lung function is dipping or you've got some symptoms going on, like couple of these that are shown here on the screen. Um, or yeah, a combination of the two. And then we've got uncontrolled asthma as a third, and most severe, like the red uh, level, where you don't want to be. You don't want to be partly or partly controlled or uncontrolled. You want to be at a stable, symptom-free, controlled asthma level. And yeah, it's just crazy to look back and think about how much we're expecting asthmatics to really like guess how they're doing. Like, hey, is your asthma controlled, partly controlled, or uncontrolled today? And that's impossible to get an objective answer to. Uh, so yeah, we're hoping to bring that home monitoring into the hands of patients and empowering them to take control of their own asthma, because you want to prevent those ER visits. You want to help those people live completely symptom free lives, because that is possible. They just need to be aided and empowered in that. But yeah, I always do that comparison to diabetes, because I would love to see in a couple of years that we think it's crazy that asthmatics would only go to the doctor once or twice a year, or only check their asthma control once or twice a year, because
Yeah.
there's something, yeah, much better than that available.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just also it's for a lot of people, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about asthma. I know that was
Mm.
something that surprised me as someone who doesn't have asthma, and the only asthma that I really see represented in media is like childhood asthma,
Mm.
and there's obviously a certain stigma around it. And so it definitely surprised me when I was working with AsthmaTuner, hearing people talk about not believing that they have asthma, or
Mm.
be like, I know something that you reference a lot is that it never really goes away.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I remember you mentioned at the very like first episode we had, like, designing uh, a tool for people who don't actually want to use it,
Right.
which is interesting. I wanted to also ask, when you have people who feel like, it's fine, it's always been like this, like I can live with it, like my symptoms aren't that bad, like how do you actually motivate them to stay on top of their treatment and taking care of themselves, and actually make it feel like it's worthwhile testing their asthma?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we like to say that like we can't be pretending that we, and you touched on that earlier, like we're a product that people would rather not have to use. Like, it's not, we're never going to see people spending hours and hours in our app. That's not the goal. So we have, yeah, right. Like what you're saying, to motivate people, like, just telling people to take care of your asthma isn't motivating enough. It's not a fun thing. Like, no one wants to be reminded that they're sick. And we don't want to be the people to, I think, I don't know if you and I are talking about it, but when like period commercials are like, yes, you can do anything and life with a
Oh
period is
my
fine and
God.
we're going to
Mm-hmm.
empower you. Like, we want to be like, no, having asthma like sucks. Like, we hear you. It's not fun to take your medicine. It's not fun to test. I mean, maybe it can be interesting, but it's not going to be like, this is great. We're not TikTok or Spotify. Like, it's not gonna be that. So we've tried to find ways to turn, like, how do we at least get people to make this a habit, like testing their asthma. Make it a habit, like in the same way brushing your teeth isn't super fun, but it is a habit, and it's for you to feel your best. It's for you to be healthy. Um, so that's just something that we keep in mind in designing, like, okay, this should be a quick thing. Like, we're not going to force you to like click around in 1,000 things. But then also, like, the motivating factor of it, like, can we turn this habit into something that you do for yourself, but also something that can have a real world impact? Um, and that's why we have been trying out this tree planting feature, where we partner with One Tree Planted, and they help companies plant trees, or donate in that way. And it's, I think, a really common one that like probably a lot of people have seen around is that you buy one product and that product plants a tree. And there's a bunch of different um, partners who do the tree planting, but we picked One Tree Planted because um, they also are good in terms of like the social impact of it. Like, we don't want to be like planting trees, but then those tree planting activities affect the people living in those places where the tree planting is happening. And yeah, that's a whole other thing. But we use One Tree Planted. So the system in the app is that for every treatment check you do, and every time you log how you've medicated, those two things are, um, there's points attached to doing those. So I can kind of show you here. I think this is the first time you're seeing this too.
Yeah, I have never seen those little animated dancing trees up at the top before. That's
I fucking
hilarious.
love them.
That is so cute.
So basically,
Tiny water can.
yeah, we've got the
Like,
levels
I
too.
love this. I love this. I remember when it was just starting. So
Yeah. That's a while ago. We've had it since, I want to say, 2020. So this
oh,
is 5 years going on the tree planting. But yeah, it's that you collect points for doing your little activities, and this will also kind of help you with forming that habit, right? Like, oh, let me get my points in today, kind of thing. And you eventually get up to a certain point where you've collected so many points that, so right now we can see here that I'm on 170 points, and I've got a bit of, yeah, I've got a ways to go, but I can see that I'm making progress every day on my tasks and my tree. And this will actually like grow in this view, and we've made it so that once you reach those points, that's when you plant a tree, and that's when one appears here in in your little tree view on that little hill. So we originally designed this to be something fun, like a gamification factor for kids mainly, but we've gotten people writing into us and are like, hey, I'm 60 years old and I love this tree thing. Like, it's the cutest thing. I love that doing the thing that I think is boring also does some good in the world. Um, People love it, and we've gotten specifically on this feature, people are like, hey, never get rid of this because it's awesome. Like,
It is.
yeah,
It is awesome. And I feel like it's such a good way of making the process feel cute and fun without condescending to people about their condition. I
yeah.
think, like you said, with the period commercials, that's so real. I like
Mm,
it's okay. Let's be honest, it's the grossest time of the month. It's horrible. And the last thing I want to hear is a company telling me how I'm supposed to feel about it. It makes me think like back when I was working at AsthmaTuner, what I did for like my final thesis
mhm,
at university was exploring persuasive design
mhm,
and specifically looking at pediatrics, which is why it's kind of funny that you guys originally made the feature for kids. But there is, I mean, what we're discussing right now is a type of persuasive design, and
definitely.
just for context for anyone that's maybe less familiar with that, there are frameworks that we as designers can leverage when we're thinking about how do we persuade users to make behavioral changes. And that is one of the hardest things as a designer to do. I mean, you as an individual can recognize how difficult it is to make changes in your routine. And
Mm,
so and that's you
yeah.
wanting to do it, right? So us as designers trying to convince people to do something that they don't even necessarily want to do is really challenging. So there are certain principles. And when I was working on this thesis, there was one framework in particular, and I only bring this up just in case it's interesting for anyone as far as like kind of an under the hood
Mhm,
understanding of how we define these different
mm,
persuasive design principles, but it's called the persuasive systems design.
okay.
Essentially, it's from these two researchers, these two Finnish researchers, and they they define these different persuasive principles that you can use to help motivate behavioral change. And there's 27 in total, and the idea is that you define the intent, so what's the action that you want the user to change, and the event, so understanding the user's context,
Mm,
because it's going to look very different. Like Bella was saying, if you have a user that doesn't doesn't really believe they have asthma, maybe they're quite active too, versus someone who really feels the symptoms of their asthma day to day and maybe is not as active. The way that you're going to motivate those people is going to look different.
mm,
And these principles can really range. So one example is like authority, where some people respond very well to anyone in a position of authority telling them that they have to do something. So what this might
mhm.
look like in health tech is when you have your doctor tell you you have to do this. For
Right.
someone like me, for example, that works pretty effectively, but not for
Okay.
everyone. What Bella's talking about here with the tree is like the gamification aspect, which a lot of apps use, like Duolingo as well, where you get to earn points, and there's like in some cases there's also the introduction of almost like a competitive aspect, which we don't
Mm,
necessarily want to include in health tech, but we see a lot with different apps as well, where you can kind of connect with others and have that social motivation too. So just wanted to add that kind of side note, just from a design like process standpoint,
mhm.
that as designers, there's all these different tools that we can use and think about when we want to motivate that behavioral change.
Really good point. To explain like what that's called, and like that there's a method behind it, and this isn't coming from nowhere. I mean, like, sure, we think it's like fun to add this in, but it's also there's also behavioral science behind it. Exactly what you're saying. Like, it's yeah, you have to find ways to convince people. You have to meet patients where they are and convince them in different ways, or motivate them in different ways, that they should care about this thing, and that they should take the time to learn about how their body works. And yeah, there's so many different ways to do that. And your solution then needs to also be able to cater to those different methods of motivating people. Um, and yeah, so this is one of them. It would be cool to like in other episodes deep dive into your thesis project, actually, to explore like the different kinds out there, because I think people are very familiar with gamification now. Like it's been such a buzzword within tech, um, and there's other things out there that aren't gamification but still have the effect of persuading you to do something. Um, but that actually brings me to, I can talk a little bit about, because another thing we released last week was the adherence, or we call it medication law, because adherence is, it's a very medical term. And we didn't want to call it that in the patient experience because, yeah, maybe you don't know what that word means. And we found that out too in just like pitching the feature to different people when testing. We would use the word adherence a lot because, like I said, we have a lot of nurses and medical professionals working at AsthmaTuner, and they've taught us what it means, and we know what it means. But it's, I mean, you're to give background about what it is. It has to do with, it can have to do with medication, but you can also adhere to other things. So in this case, it's that the result of you testing your asthma in this flow, the result of it is that I'm being told that, okay, my control level is good. I've got my asthma under control today. I'm going to continue to take my inhaler that I actually have with me right here. This guy. Um, I'm also, when needed, because it's pollen season, I can take a little allergy tablet as needed, right? Um, but then everything kind of relies on the patient following this. And we all know that taking medication, especially for chronic illnesses, that's a whole thing that you have to put into your routine, that you have to design your routine around this to help you remember to take your meds. There's countless products that remind you to take your meds, that organize your meds so that you know you're taking all the right ones correctly. And it's, yeah, but it becomes a bit of a black hole information wise for patients and clinicians, because how are you then supposed to follow up on this? Like, how do we know that this treatment plan that we've prescribed is actually working for you? And then when it's not working, is it not working because you're not able to follow it as it's designed, or for various reasons? Um, or is it about you needing a different type of medication, or we need to up your dosage? It's such a, yeah, we, there's no way for you to, besides talking to your patient and hoping that they're honest with you about how well they're taking their meds. It's yeah, it's a black hole there. We don't know what's actually going on after this screen. So the way this medication log thing came about, like, and the way we did that was, we knew that this was a bit of a tricky subject, like how to ask patients how they're medicating or not, because the patient knows that there's a correct answer, and you want to, it's like going to the dentist and them asking you how are you doing with your flossing, and you know what they want to hear, and you're going to probably tell them that whether or not it's true. And then on the other side, you've got the clinician is like, well, I don't know if I could trust your answer, because so then it's like, what's the point of asking this question? What's the point of having this conversation? So we found that in our research, like before doing this medication logging feature, that the real issue was that patients and clinicians aren't able to have that open and honest dialogue with each other about this subject. So it wasn't about like showing exact data of like exactly how many pills you've taken in 2 months, or exactly how many puffs you've taken of your inhaler. It's not about that. It's about really finding like a safe space, or like encouraging uh, a discussion between those two sides in an open and honest way. So that was a super cool thing that we were able to discover, and it was like a big aha moment for us, figuring that out, that like, oh, it's about this. It's not about these like magic numbers that tell me if this treatment is working or not. It's about encouraging those conversations. But we asked each of the sides, what is it that frustrates you? Um, and we found that they were both frustrated because, like I mentioned before, the clinician doesn't know if they can trust the patient's answer, but then the patient is like, well, like, you're not hearing me, you're not listening, like I'm not being believed here. And that's such a funny, like, they're both frustrated at each other, but they're also both trying to help the patient feel better, right? Like that's it was such a, I don't know, it was kind of funny that like they felt like the other one was working against them, but really they should be a team. Like you should be a team with your clinician or with your patient. um so it was a lot of like, oh, this is the elephant in the room, like talking about how the patient takes their meds. Huge elephant in the room. But yeah, you've got these like two frustrated sides. So that's a really powerful question. I would say, like, if you're working on something, not even if like you don't even have to be a designer, but if you're working on a project and you're trying to figure out first, you're trying to like solve this problem, you need to understand the problem. Like we had Dr. Jared talk about in our last episode, that you really have to, you have to ask this question, like where's that friction. And I found that this is a really good, simple way to open up that conversation. Ask like, where are the pain points, like we call it in tech speak. um, but yeah, what is it that's frustrating? Because yeah, like I said earlier, ultimately there's a shared goal of making the patient feel better, right? um, so adherence, going back to that word, is really a way for the clinician to ask the patient about, okay, how well are you following the treatment plan that I gave you a couple of months ago? So yeah, after a certain amount of time, you're going to have that follow up, and you don't want the patient to just answer in a way that just pleases the clinician. You want to answer in an honest way and not be shamed for it. Not be like, oh, if you just followed my directions, like you would feel better. Like just do that. Like what's the problem? But there's so many things we ask of patients, I think, that we don't, or we need to be better about reflecting on. Like the clinicians are asking a certain thing of patients. Um, and taking medications is not, it's a big, it can be a big lifestyle change. It's not just like, just do it. There's, yeah, you need to have a bit of grace when it comes to that. So here I'm going to show again what we came up with. Like, how do we get these patients to record how they medicate, but without it being like counting pills or counting how many puffs they've taken? We've got this screen here that I'm highlighting that says log medications, and if I tap on this, I would get to this screen, and it's asking the question, "How did you medicate today?" And you can answer with multiple things. I took my daily medications today, which is in the U.S. I think called a, the one is the rescue inhaler. It's not this one. This is your controller medication. So this is like your maintenance inhaler that you should be taking to keep that inflammation in your airways at bay. And that's what's actually helping you long term. The rescue inhaler, on the other hand, which we here call as needed medications here, um, all that's going to do, it depends on the medication, but a lot of the times we see that with people who have asthma, that they're only treating, they're putting a band-aid on their symptoms. They're just treating that attack when it already happens, and that's too late. You should be treating the long-term chronic inflammation in the airways with that maintenance inhaler. Or, you know what? Maybe you completely forgot to take your medication today. Maybe you took less, or none at all, and that's fine. That's an option here, and I'm going to show you that because this is what we want patients to be honest about. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And I think the magic of the adherence tool is asking this question, is asking why. Why did you take less medication or none today? So is it about financial reasons? Are your inhalers, especially in the US, I think they're hundreds of dollars sometimes. That's crazy. Like, then we're going to see people choose to pay their rent or pay for groceries rather than buy their inhalers, sadly. And same thing here in Sweden, the costs are starting to rise for medications. Maybe it was a simple matter of forgetting. That's fine too. That happens to all of us. Yeah, there's all these reasons, and that's what we found is like, this is the information we need to be giving clinicians so that they know, is this treatment plan not working because the patient's worried about side effects or financial reasons? Or is it about the medication needing to be changed or dosage needing to be adjusted? So yeah, I'm really excited about what comes of this if we can get those conversations going.
100%. I love this finding, and I love even that little call out at the bottom saying thanks for being honest about taking less medication today. I noticed that right away, and I think little moments that feel very human too speak to me a lot. I know that like for doing taxes in the US, a lot of people use TurboTax, and they've called out the UX in TurboTax as feeling very human for something that typically is known as being very dry and inaccessible for a lot of people. And there's even moments where I don't know if they still have this in the experience, but I know it was shown one year. When if someone noted having a death in the family, there was like a little note that said like, we're so sorry about your loss. And they didn't have to do that, but that was just something that acknowledges where the person is at that moment. And I think this is similar, just having that moment of being like, we acknowledge where you're at emotionally. Like it might feel a little bit shameful to not do it, but that's okay.
Right. Exactly. And that, tying that back to the tree feature, that if we're rewarding you for filling out the medication log. If you, for a whole month, just fill in that you haven't taken your meds, you're still going to get your treat. So that was also a really important thing for us, that we're not rewarding you medicating 100% correctly, because that's setting up patients for failure. We're rewarding you for being honest about how you're medicating. So let's go. I'm getting excited about it.
That hit.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to see what happens with this. Like I said, like we just released this, I think, end of last week. So
yeah, no, I mean, I love it. I love how far it's come to, and I think it's just such a good example of health tech that, as I mentioned before, feels very human and feels like it is meeting patients where they are. And like I said too, I love that insight that you had about it's not about seeing all the data, which I feel like is what a lot of medical devices are leaning towards now, especially when it comes to tracking. And yes, there's a lot of value in being able to see your metrics, but at the end of the day, when it comes to some of the chronic diseases and things that are less exciting than like, tracking with your Aura ring, it's like it does start to come down to being more about that social connection, that relationship with your caregiver. So
I'm glad you brought up that last point too, about like thinking beyond, like providing value beyond just large amounts of data. Like I think that's one of our like, we reflected on like what makes a desirable medtech product or health tech product, and that was one of our points, that it's something that that really it takes into account where the person is, like what do we do with that information and that data after we collect it. It's not value enough to just have that giant mountain of data. It isn't. And I just want to share our other, I think we've got two or three other ones. Our first one is, like I was mentioning earlier, that a desirable medtech product is one that is inspired by things that frustrate its users, like where things go wrong. Like that's where we have the ability to step in and create true value and like something that actually helps someone in their everyday life. Um, the next one is that it normalizes and celebrates imperfect efforts to stay healthy, and that just means that we can't expect people to like day one just get their meds, start following that treatment plan perfectly, start taking their 4 puffs a day or whatever it is. When you have to get used to it, you have to get over those maybe initial hiccups of just starting a long-term medication and finding a way to implement it into your existing routine. That takes time, like to form that habit. So we have to celebrate those little efforts. And maybe that means that you forget to take your, in my case, for example, it was that I was doing really good with my morning puffs, but my evening ones, I just could not get myself to remember to do them. So I had to start thinking about, yeah, how can I fix that one little puzzle piece? But it doesn't mean that I shouldn't celebrate. Like, okay, I'm doing good on my morning puffs. Like that should be
Yeah.
rewarded somehow. And then we've got a desirable medtech product is one that supports patients in changing their behavior. So that's the reason why we ask the question, why did you medicate this way? Um, if it's about financial reasons, then but the patient does want to take the medication, then maybe we need to find a cheaper alternative. Are there payment plans at the pharmacy? What we have to then provide that information because maybe they're not going to get it otherwise. And then we've got the last one, that a desirable medtech product is one that removes obstacles that get in the way of collaboration. So I think we look at healthcare often as like something that's like done to us. But especially in chronic healthcare, there needs to be a team effort of like you going to see your doctor or nurse, them evaluating what's going on with you. But in order for them to do that, you've got to do your part and test your asthma or test your lung function regularly for a while, for them to get that understanding of how you're doing. And then you've got to remember that you're on the same team, that the end goal is to make the patient feel better, and like what needs to be done in that team, for that to happen. And one of those things is to be able to have honest conversations. You have to be able to ask like your dumb questions, or the ones that you feel are dumb. You need to be able to do that. Otherwise, like there's no hope.
The other principle that really stood out to me was celebrating the imperfect efforts, because I think a lot of people struggle with that, even outside of health tech. It's like celebrating, even if you weren't as productive on a certain day as you wanted to be, still being able to knock a few things off your to-do list is something worth acknowledging. You don't always have to focus on the negative. And so I think integrating that kind of energy into your designs as well is really helpful for a lot of people. And I'm sure it's a huge weight off for a lot of people when they already have so many other things to remember and deal with that they are stressing themselves about already. The last thing they need is stress from the tools that they use. So yeah, I love that one too. It's funny because AsthmaTuner is like, it's quite a niche app in like, being for people who have asthma, but I feel like it does such a good job of encapsulating so many important pillars to keep in mind when you're designing for healthcare. And there's like an amazing group of people behind this, and you can see the passion and the love that goes into this app from everyone that works on it. So
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, we're a scrappy little bunch. Yeah,
Sounds like you're like the like team of rats from Ratatouille, like working together,
just making this app come together. I mean, you're not wrong.
I saw a meme. This is so unrelated, but just speaking of Ratatouille, I saw a meme the other day.
Yeah,
that was like Ratatouille is a crazy movie because the villain wasn't even evil. He just didn't want to eat food cooked by rats. And I was like, wait,
that's so true.
Such a good point.
Oh my god, yeah, but they really made him villainy.
Yeah.
Oh
Anyways.
my god, I love that.
Send me that. And on that note.